We have covered or completed Enarsi, and now we will move to the Encor. So Encor is mostly, you will see, is the topic or the certification, which is also the prerequisite for CCIE lab preparation and attending CCIE lab. So if you want to book a CCIE lab, you need to have the Encor exam uh, under your belt. So you will be able to see the dates and everything to book the CCIE lab as well. So earlier there used to be a dedicated CCIE qual exam. So CCNP was different. It was three certifications route switch, or three exams route switch and T-shoot. And then you have to do the CCIE qual exam, which was also a written exam to be able to book the CCIE lab. But now they actually made the core exam, the Encor, as the prerequisite or like the qual exam for CCIE lab. So it's not only going to help you to get your CCNP certification, but this is also what you need to get to the CCIE level, right? Somebody else has also joined. Let me see. I see the name Noma. So welcome to the class. All right. So as I was saying, that this can also be used as a prerequisite for CCIE level. So this is something we had seen before as well. Is that on the entry level we have the CCNA certification, and then on the CCNP they divided this into two parts, right? One is the core exam, and one is one of the concentration exam. So the core exam into every track, like is it routing switching, which is called enterprise infrastructure, or security, or wireless, sorry, not wireless collaboration. So these things you will see that they have their own core exams. And then for concentration exam, you can choose one of the technologies that you want to go into more deeper information, like we did NRC, which is advanced enterprise advanced routing and services. And you could also choose wireless network or SD-WAN, more in-depth SD-WAN solution to do the one of the concentration exams. But the core is the required exam, like the one Encor that we are going to do. That's the required one. And when you go for the CCIE exam, you can see there is one core, one technology core exam, and one lab in the same track. So, for example, Encor is for routing and switching or enterprise infrastructure. So, if you pass Encor exam, you are eligible to book the CCIE enterprise infrastructure lab exam, right? So, you can do this, or enterprise wireless lab exam. So, with that information, you will see that the CCNP program is a program which includes two particular certifications, core and concentration. Concentration is NRC, and the core is Encor. And the new version or the revised version is version 1.1. There are minor changes which they did for this new version. And whenever the later version comes, as you know that we keep on updating our recorded base. So you have the recordings available, and whenever we update the recordings with anything new they add or something they remove, you will see that that will be reflected on the portal as well. So you will have the lifetime access. So anytime there is a change into the CCNP exam, you will get the new information on the portal. That is one of the strengths of this course as well, apart from the heavily hands-on based, right? So zero to CCNP, the program that we have is the one core exam. So one is that's called Encor. Actually, there should not be an E. It's just ENCOR. Also works as a CCIE qual exam, right? And one elective exam, NRC, which is of course you can choose any other elective exam as well, like concentrating on wireless or SD-WAN. But we had decided to go with the core or the routing topics, because these are the main topics you will see in the CCI exam also. OSPF, EIGRP, BGP, policy-based routing, all these things are very important for the exam. So we had covered that, and now we are moving to Encor. And you need to pass both these exams if you want to become CCNP certified. But if your plan is just to go ahead and do the CCIE, and you are not interested into getting the CCNP certification, then you can just go with the Encor, and you can skip one of the elective or the concentration exam. That will be perfectly fine, because CCIE you don't need any prerequisites, just the core exam passing. So speaking of the Encor exam, it's 350-401, the exam code, and it means implementing and operating Cisco Enterprise Network Core Technologies. That's the full name. On the other hand, if you are preparing for NRC, it's implementing Cisco Enterprise Advanced Routing and Services. So that's why you see that we did not cover any switching in NRC, because the switching, mostly the basics of switching are moved to Encor, and the core routing is there into NRC. Although if you're just doing Encor, you will also see there are routing protocol information you need to know, EIGR, POSPF. And the reason is because if people are just opting for Encor with aim of CCIE lab in the mind, then they should have some basic knowledge of routing as well before moving on to preparing for CCIE, right? That's why you will see that routing protocols will come back in Encor as well. And there are separate OVAs for this. So this week I'm going to send you another OVA for Encor, because you will see that we will do some basic SD-WAN practicals as well. And apart from that, we will also do some Python programming. And there are some protocols like RESTconf and NetConf, which are transportation protocol. You can actually send instructions to the router or switch and retrieve information or change information on those using NetConf or RESTconf. So we will see examples of those as well, and embedded event management. So all these advanced EEM scripting that will also be included into this. So we will have a lots of hands-on, but we will need slightly different devices here, right? So for example, for SD-WAN practicals, we will need all the SD-WAN devices. We will need the controllers and the orchestrators, vBond, vManage, vSmart, and the VHS devices. Also for Python programming and to change the configuration of the router, we want to use the iOS XE router. So we are going to use CSR series routers. And because of that, there will be a separate OVS. We are not going to use the one which we used into NRC, or we generally use into the NRC, where we just need the core routing and switching, right? Also, everything will be pre-set up in this one, except the SD-WAN, because SD-WAN you will have the images, but we will see how we can perform the basic licensing, and also how we can configure some very basic stuff. The more important part for SD-WAN is to understand the logic as far as CCNP is concerned. Because if you see the syllabus or curriculum of CCNP, they are not going to ask you any lab question or any simulation on SD-WAN in the CCNP Encor exam. There might be some simulations about switching or routing questions, but not about SD-WAN. So having the basic knowledge about how things work, how do they connect to each other, that is more than enough for that. And same thing applies to SDA also, which is the LAN side software-defined networking solution. On the other hand, Python, we will do some basic configuration, and we will see how we can integrate this with EM or RESTconf and NetConf, and we will see some practicals of those as well, right? But again, more in-depth practicals actually follow in CCIE. So what is the structure of this course? So we'll see that it is going to be 2 times a week. So this week we only had this session, introduction session, so that we can understand what will be the structure. So from next week onward, it will be every Friday and Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern time, which I have sent you the invite and the details into the email. But if you have any confusion or anything that you missed, please contact Christian, or you can send an email to me as well, and we will clear out any confusion. Also, if you have joined the Facebook group, you can ask any questions on the Facebook group as well, and any technical questions throughout this course. Of course, we will have Q&A sessions within the Zoom session, but after that, during the week when you are practicing, if you have any questions, we actually encourage you guys to go and ask it on the Facebook group, because there are other people also who have been practicing or preparing for CCNP, CCIE already. Some of them already passed CCIE, some of them already have done CCNP. So it's a good community where you can get answers, and I will also answer there. And sometimes you ask a question with other people also want to ask, so they will also get the answer there. So it's a better platform to ask questions. Or when you are watching the recordings on your own time, there is always a comment section into the below the recording as well, where you can ask a question. So anything you type there, that directly comes to me, and I can reply to you on that. So the session itself will be 2 hours per session, like 2 hours per Zoom meeting, but that's tentative. So what happens is that this is a topic driven, or a particular technology driven class, not the time driven class. So sometimes you will see some topics might be done in 1.5 hours, some may take more than 2 hours. So whenever we start a topic, we are going to finish the required part, no matter how much time it takes. So it's just a rough idea. It will be around 2 hours per session. So this will be a live Zoom session uh, every week twice, where I'm going to explain you some certain concept. And if it is a practical concept, then I'm going to show you the lab configuration as well. Because we are talking about CCNP, it's a multiple choice question exam. You will see a lot of MCQs. You will see drag and drops where you have to match the values, and then of course you might see some simulations as well. The idea is not that to prepare you only for simulation, because that would have been very easy. Just some switching and routing practicals, and we would be done. But the idea to include the labs or the practicals in this is to make you more confident into the technology. For example, if I'm teaching you spanning tree protocol and I'm telling you how some certain things work, that is actually enough for the exam. But then when you do it yourself and you check actually the way it is working, and then we change the way it works by changing the cost value or changing the port priority or the bridge priority, and see that how this affect the whole overall infrastructure. If you configure BPDU guard, if you configure root guard, how do they actually react or respond to intruder packets with the BPDUs which are inferior or undesirable at completely. So you will see that that gives you more confidence because you learned it and then you implemented it, and it makes more sense. That's why whenever it is possible to practicalize things, we are going to do that. But then there will be some certain topics where you just need to understand the basic idea and the overall structure, because it's just a theoretical topic, right? So that's why in-depth theory is very important. And whenever it is possible, we will do practical labs using the OVA that I will share with you. In case we are going to do a practical lab, I'm going to send you a PDF of that lab after the session, along with the solution file. So sometimes it might take a couple of days before I send you the solution file. Sometimes I'll send you right along with the question file. Because remember, throughout this course, your mindset should be of learning and not of testing yourself. So when I send you the PDF and you are trying to do it on your own, don't think, why don't I remember this or why don't I understand that? You go ahead and check solution files as many times as you like, because you are still learning and you are still registering the information that you didn't understand into the session or you forgot into the session. You check it again and then it becomes a revision, right? And that's why you can ask me, if you don't understand something into the solution file, you can ask me on the Facebook group or under the recorded session comment section. But the idea is, don't test yourself unless you have to test yourself when it is the end of the course and then you're going for the exam, right? Have the mindset of learning. And then the topologies that we are going to use, they are all going to be EVNG based topologies with multiple routers, switches, SD-WAN devices, or specific devices that we will need for net conference for any automation or programmability part, right? It is very important to know this, that if you want to do it on your own, then it becomes a big hassle. For example, installing EVNG, then acquiring all the images for routers, switches, and SD-WAN is yet another headache for all the licensing issues. And then setting it up, licensing it, and then making topology so that you can use it. It takes a lot of time and effort away from you. And then you can start practicing and learning what is important for the exam. So what we did is we removed all the headache from you, and we created this OVA, which includes all the necessary softwares within EVNG. So EVNG will be there. All the images are pre-installed. They are already licensed, and the topologies are pre-built. So you can directly concentrate right from day one on the configurations and learning the concepts which are important for the exam, and not to practice the exam, right? So that is one of the big benefit that you get in this course. And of course, you will have the lifetime access to the recordings. So let's say if we are covering the SD-WAN topic today, or if we are covering BGP today, or STP today, that you will see that that will be completely recorded. You will be able to watch it as many number of times as you want. And whenever there is a change into the course, because Cisco every few years there is a recycle of the certification curriculum, we are also going to update it. For example, we used to have route switch and T-shoot different topics, and there was no SD-WAN or automation in CCNP before. But as soon as they introduced this, we also integrated that into our videos. And there are people who bought CCNP from us back in 2018 and 19. They got the complete upgrade completely free of cost. There is no extra charge for that. So lifetime access means anytime there is a change, you will still get the access to those changes. And if there is no change also, you will get the access for lifetime. So you can revision important topics anytime you like, right? So talking about the Encor exam, the 350-401, what exactly do they cover in this exam, and what are you expected to know for this exam? So this exam tests your knowledge and skills related to implementing core enterprise network technology, right? So basically infrastructure, mostly we're talking about switching and some part of routing. Dual staking, you should be pretty comfortable with IPv6 as well, just like IPv4. Virtualization technologies, this one is mostly a theoretical topic where you need to know what is virtualization, type 1 versus type 2, and what is the hypervisor types that we use, and how exactly it is different from containers services. So virtualization versus containers, how exactly do they differ? So some of the theoretical topics are there. Network assurance is basically the network management and auditing, you can call it. Like you have implemented everything and now you want to see that if there is an event, something happened, or some kind of security breach happens, or if some kind of threshold has been crossed, like processor is overused, or somebody is trying to access a device which the person is not supposed to access. How do we know about that? So of course, SNMP has been the de facto standard for a long time. So SNMP, NetFlow, all these things will be part of the network assurance. Security, where we are going to understand the access control list, control plane policing. Again, these things are also part of Enarsi. But if somebody is just doing Encor to go for CCIE further, then these are important things. So they have included this again in Encor as well. And of course, the last part is automation. So in case of automation, we are going to understand the software-defined networking, Python programming, NetConf and RESTConf technologies, and embedded event management, or EEM scripts or EEM applets that we can use in routers switches to automate things, right? So that will be the last part. So talking about the infrastructure first, the first topic that we have, and this is where you will see we will have the most lab, because these are easily something that you can practice with labs, and this actually solidify your understanding as well. So we are going to cover switching. So we will start with VLANs and trunking. We will understand the concept of ether channel, layer 2 and layer 3, static versus dynamic ether channel, which is basically the link grouping or link bundling technology. One of the big topic will be spanning tree protocol, where we are going to go in depth of how exactly STP work, how we can tune it, what are the different variants of STP like MST, STP, RSTP, or common spanning tree, which is called CST. So what are the differences between those? Also, what are the features that make it rapid or fast convergence features? And also, what are the features for securing STP, the security features of STP? So we'll cover everything there. Also, we'll touch routing also a little bit, like comparing routing concepts of EIGRP and OSPF. What exactly difference is between a distance vector versus link state? How does the load balancing work in these routing protocols? How do they perform path selection, path operations? How does the metric work in EIGRP versus OSPF? And how we can tune the metric to do the traffic engineering, right? We can decide which path a particular packet needs to take by manipulating the metric. And in case of OSPF, we'll also talk about different types of areas. You will see that there are normal areas, and then there are special areas called stub areas. What is the difference between those, and how does the different devices operate, like ABR or ASBR? Or in case of EIGRP, what is the backup path, which is called feasible successor, and how does the query and reply process work in that? So in OSPF, we are going to learn IP version 6 as well. So you will see that OSPF has two variations, OSPF version 2 and OSPF version 3. Version 3 is, earlier they created it only for IPv6, but now they have a new syntax where OSPF v3 can have address families. So you can run IP version 4 and IP version 6 under the umbrella of the same OSPF configuration mode. And we will learn all the different aspects of multi-area, summarization, filtering, and the OSPF network type. So this is going to be an in-depth discussion of routing protocol as well. So again, this will be a good revision from NRC perspective and few more things. And if you are coming directly to Encor, don't worry, we are going to cover everything from scratch. So you don't need any prior knowledge apart from the basic networking knowledge for this one. And for BGP, they are limiting it only to the eBGP between directly connected neighbors. So basically, we want to see how does the best path selection algorithm work and how does the neighbor relationship work. So there are 11 path attributes which are checked by BGP to decide which path is the best path. So we are going to see how exactly that work and how we can manipulate these things. So we can have some labs on the BGP as well. Apart from this, in infrastructure, you have policy-based routing as well, and then some minor topics which are there. For example, wireless LAN infrastructure. Again, this is mostly theory. And then we can also check the network time protocol or network address translation, some higher availability features like hot standby router protocol or virtual router redundancy protocol. These are used for having multiple gateways sharing the same virtual IP address. So we'll see how we can configure it, and we can have the lab for that as well. And multicasting. Multicasting is one to many, and you have to communicate with multiple devices. So how we can set up a basic multicast routed network using the PIM protocol independent multicast, and also using IGMP, Internet Group Management Protocol, and using some routers and devices. And we will also see how the multicast traffic can flow from one location to multiple locations or one to many, right? Next topic or next branch is architecture. And you will see that this is also mostly theoretical in exam. You will not see any lab on this, maybe except on some basic idea of QoS. There might be, but other than that, you will not see any lab for this, because you need to just understand the design principle of an enterprise network, like how exactly we can use, like what are the different type of topologies we can use. Cisco has a very standard three-tier architecture where we use the access, distribution, and core layers, or you can use collapse core, where distribution and core layer can be collapsed together and using a single layer for that. Also known as a spine and leaf topology. So what are the different design aspects do we use? And then working principles of Cisco SD-WAN, which is the software-defined networking solution on the WAN side, and Cisco SDA, which is a software-defined networking solution on the LAN side, software-defined access, it is called. So again, in the exam, you don't have any labs, so you don't need to do any practicals on these. But just for checking purpose, we can do a basic SD-WAN practical. Of course, we will learn the concept in depth so that you know exactly how SD-WAN work and how SDA work. But SD-WAN, we can actually make a practical as well. We can see a basic configuration, how device interoperate and how do they communicate with each other, right? On the other hand, quality of service or QoS, we can actually see how exactly it is configured, what are the different aspects of QoS, and then the different types of tables used by routers and switches, like Cisco Express Forwarding Table or Content Addressable Memory or CAM table, which is the fancy name for MAC address table. TCAM or Ternary Content Addressable Memory, which can actually cache the entries from access control lists or any kind of filtering you're applying on the switches. FIB or RIB, which are called forwarding information based or routing information based. So RIB is actually routing table, and FIB is the forwarding table, which are the cached entries from the routing table. So FIB and CEF are interchangeable terms, and adjacency tables, which are used to have the resolved MAC addresses of the next hop devices, so that you don't need to send the ARP request again, and you can directly use that information to throw the frame out to the next device. So again, mostly theoretical, but very important part of the CCNP Encor exam, the architecture part. After this, we will understand the concept of virtualization. As I mentioned earlier, hypervisor types, virtual machine, virtual switching, what is VRF, virtual routing and forwarding used in MPLS, different tunneling technologies like GRE and IPsec, and some of the protocols that can be used to create the underlay versus overlay configuration, like LISP, location ID separation protocol, or virtual extendable LAN or VXLAN. So these are actually also important, because you see that SDA or the LAN side solution or enterprise side, campus side solution of software defined networking, that does use Lisp and VXLAN for its operation. So understanding these protocols can also be very useful. This topic will be mostly theoretical. We might have some labs about VRF, GRE, IPsec, and maybe a little bit of the Lisp. But mostly you need to understand the differences only. There will be no lab in the CCNP exam for these. Then comes network assurance. So we will see what we can do to make sure network is working smoothly. Like what are the different debugs option, conditional debugging, trace route and ping, SNMP, netflow and syslog, uh, port analyzing using switch port analyzer, span, rspan, ER-span, IPSLA to make sure that the round trip time is according to the agreement or the reachability is there. We can check that. And netconf and resconf. So netconf and resconf can be used to not only query the devices, but also can change something on the devices using these protocols. Next thing is security. So securing your router or switching environment is very important. So we start with verifying the identity, that is called authentication. Means how do we know that which user is connecting to which line? So we will see that there are different lines like console, auxiliary, VTY lines, and the VTY again we can use transportation protocol, telnet or secure shell. We will see how we can configure it to properly use the credentials, maybe local or maybe through a authentication server called AAA. So authentication and authorization can be done using a AAA server, which could be Radius or TechX Plus. So you can actually offload this work to a server, sending all the authentication and authorization requests to the server and getting the response from there. ACS and COP, so access control list and the control plane policing. Both of these actually make sure that only the legitimate devices or the packets are allowed to the device or from the device. So we will see how we can restrict these operations. ACLs are very important because you will see that these are nothing but the list, right? Access control list. It lists few networks and the associated action. So you can use it for filtering and security purpose, of course. But if you use the action permit, then it becomes just a list of networks which you can actually reference by referencing the ACL number, which can become very powerful in network address translation or in BGP, where you want to match some certain networks by calling the ACL, right? REST APIs, representational state transfer APIs. These are actually the APIs or calls which are done by HTTPS. So what exactly do we mean by API? So API is basically a gateway between two different applications. So if you want to enable communication between two different applications, so that they can query and reply to each other, you can use APIs. For that, you need to have the support for the API, and you should be listening for those API calls, right? And REST is very, very popular because it uses HTTPS, means port number 443, which is mostly open on many, many devices, right? Because we do allow the web services or secure web services. So, for example, if you have a router and you want to query something from the router, like what is the IP address on the gigabit Ethernet 1, then you can use a REST call and get the answer in the particular format, which is called the data format, like JSON, JavaScript object notation, or XML, extensible markup language. You can get the answer, and you will be able to see what IP address you have on that interface. You can actually change the IP address also by sending the RESTconf call. So we'll see that as well, some of the practicals. .1x is very important. This is actually a switch authentication mechanism where you authenticate the ports and the end users connected to those ports. So it is like your first line of defense, where if somebody is connecting to your switch, you will not allow any traffic unless until you know who the person is and which the device is. So you can actually have proper authentication there. Web authentication or pre-shared key, all these are security methods, or EAPOL, so EAP protocol, extensible authentication protocol over LAN, so EAPOL, four-way handshake, and some design components we are going to understand as well. Here in the lab simulation part, you might see some ACL or control plane policing labs in the exam. But apart from this, there will be nothing else like .1x or WebAuth or PSK. It's very unlikely that they will ask you the practical questions. But although we are going to check the REST API practicals as well, and how .1x is configured on the switch side. So we will cover that, but don't worry, we are going to cover more than you might expect into the exam, because as I mentioned earlier, the main idea is to, whenever we can actually practicalize it, it's better, so that we have more understanding, a deeper understanding of the topic, and we become more comfortable with that. And the next one is automation, last but not the least important. So we are going to understand the Python language. Again, Python is a huge language and it needs its own course if you want to learn Python. But we are going to understand enough for the networking part, and we'll see some of the basic idea about Python. So if you have never done Python before, don't worry. We will start it from the scratch, like exactly how different variables work, what are the different types of lists, dictionaries, all these things we use, and what are the different logic items we use, like the if and then statements, the loops, for example, for loop, while loop, what is the concept of a function, some of the things that we'll check. And finally, we will also see a component on Python which we can use to send the, for example, RESTconf or netconf instructions to the router using a Python script. So we'll see some of those examples. JavaScript object notation is one of the data format. So it is just how you represent data. How do you exchange data between server and client? Like as I told you earlier, if I'm querying the router, what IP address do you have on Gigabit Ethernet 1 interface? And the router is responding that information to me. So how does it respond that information to me? Is it in plain text, like saying Gigabit Ethernet 1, IP address is this, or is it something else? So that is called the data structure, right? So JSON structure is very clear and very easy to read comparing to XML. XML is more bulky because every tag you start, you have to close as well with the forward slash. So it just has more information. It's slightly more difficult to read. So it is just how you represent data. Then we are going to understand something called Yang data models. Very important concept. You will see that when you are going to ask something to a device, like tell me what IP address you have on the gigabit interface, or tell me what is the status of your line VTY, which protocol is allowed, telnet or secure shell. How are you going to ask these questions? And how do you know what can you ask to a device? So these are called data models. They actually define the syntax for your question, that how exactly should you ask the question to get the correct answer. You cannot just send a simple text, tell me the IP address of Gigabit Ethernet 1. You cannot write this line and send to the router. Router will not understand that. Router need to get the instructions in a certain structure, and the structure is defined in data models. And Yang data model is actually widely implemented and accepted by many vendors, and that's what generally the RESTconf and netconf also use. And APIs for SDN controllers. Basically, the REST API, as I told you, you can ask the router what IP on the Gigabit Ethernet 1. Similarly, you can ask your SD-WAN device, for example, your vManage. You can query how many VHs we have, or in SDA, how many switches are being managed by the controller. So these kind of questions you can send using APIs as well, right? And then, of course, you get a response when you send an API request. The response could be the data that you requested, or if you change something, the response could be okay or not okay or error. So what different common response codes do we use in REST API? We'll learn. EEM is the scripting module of router. So you can call it the programming language of the Cisco routers, embedded event management. But it has a very limited use case. Basically, some event happens and you want to respond to that event by executing some actions, taking some actions. So for example, if the processing threshold, processor usage goes beyond 80%, I want to send an email to the administrator, and I also want to shut down some interface or remove some services. You can take those actions based on the event. But it becomes very powerful because it can also call a Python script. So if an event happens, instead of doing only few things, you can call a Python script. And then the Python script can actually, of course, it's very powerful. It can do way more things than a normal EEM script can do. So that combination becomes very powerful. And lastly, there is a theoretical topic of orchestration tools. Again, there will be no lab for this. In the exam also, there will be no simulation. But you need to understand what do we mean by orchestration and how do they differ, the Ansible versus Puppet versus Chef, these different tools, right? So we can see that there are a lot of things that we are going to cover in Encor. So what exactly are we going to use for this? So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to use a software which is called EVNG. EVNG is nothing but a Ubuntu software, Ubuntu Linux operating system, which can actually virtualize routers and switches in an emulated manner. So it's an emulator, not a simulator. Means it actually uses the original operating system image in the background. So just the hardware is missing, but other than that, you get all the commands that you would get in a real router or in a real switch. So it's not a simulator. It's not simulating to be a router. It is actually the router because it is using the real OS image, but just the hardware is missing. It's just virtualized. So it's better because you can create multiple routers, connect them any way you want, and the cost goes extremely down because you don't need to purchase the hardware for that. And we use this on VMware. So of course you can decide to use VirtualBox or any other virtualization software you're using, but we recommend VMware because that's what we use. So if you have any issues and you want some support or some recommendations, we will be actually quicker and faster to answer your question and to solve the questions if it is based on VMware on a Windows machine. That's what we are using on Windows 11. So if you're using KVM or something else, we might not be able to help you with the software. Of course, when it comes to technological questions, any Encor question, we are here to help you. We will definitely answer you. But if it is about the software, then mostly our concentration is on VMware on a Windows machine. Also, because there might be some SD1 practicals, so it's better to have at least 16 gig of RAM. But if you have 8 gig also, that may work, although it will be slightly slower. But 16 gig is recommended. Anything more than that is welcome. So I will send you an OVA which will have the EVNG software. You just need to import the OVA in VMware and EVNG will be automatically installed, which will have the topologies already set. So you will have all the important images, their licenses and topologies built up. And how do you practice anything on those topologies? So the lab files are the PDF files that I will send you every week for the next week practical as well, right? So I will send you not only for this week, for next week as well, so that you can see what is coming next. And of course, there will be a solution file sent along with the lab file. So you will know exactly how to do it. And again, you have to have the mindset of learning and not testing yourself in this period. You just need to learn and practice as much as you can. So that's why during the off days in a week, you are encouraged actually to do the labs again. And you can contact me on Facebook or under the comment section, as I mentioned, right? So talking about EVNG, you will see that it's on VMware. Topology already said. The OVA file will have everything that you need. And the recommended RAM, as I mentioned, is 16 gig. And also when you import it into the VMware, make sure that the network type is set to NAT, and you need to adjust the RAM according to your system. If your system only have 8 gig, you might only be able to give it like up to 6 gig. If you have 16 gig, you can give 12 to 14 gig to EVNG. Don't worry, it's not going to use all of it immediately. It starts using more and more gradually when you start more and more devices or more resource hungry devices inside the EVNG. So don't worry, it is not going to immediately reserve everything. But the network type you should set to NAT. So when you go to the properties of the virtual machine after importing the OVA, make sure that the memory is set to whatever you want. And then the network adapter type is NAT, especially the first network adapter. If you see multiple like network adapter 2, 3, don't worry about the others, but the first one must be set to NAT so that you will be able to get the IP address automatically from your VMware system, right? So that's the basic idea. That's what I wanted to cover today. So some of the things that you will see that we are going to cover will require a lot of practicals and a lot of theory. Some things will only be theory. So it depends on which part we are going to cover and how exactly we are going to go about it. So that's it from my side for today. Just the introduction part I wanted to cover. So let me allow you guys to unmute in case if you have any questions. I see a question from Latevi. Please can we have the slides at the end? Yeah, sure. So I'll send you this PPT. You mean this PPT that I use, this PowerPoint presentation?
You will give us a walkthrough of EVNG, right?
Yeah. So you will see that there is a portal where you can see the pre-recorded sessions. For example, if we are going to cover STP this week, after we cover it, then the same recording you will be able to find on the portal and this will be lifetime access. So the same portal, the very first video will be about how to set up the EVNG and how to start the routers, how to save the configuration, how to wipe it if you want to start again. Some basic walkthrough that how exactly EVNG work will be available there, right? So you will be able to watch that video to understand that. That actually also covers how to import the OVA, start from there, and then all the way up to how we can start the device and devices in the topology and use it. So I hope that answer your question, Naman.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thanks. So any other question, guys? And during the week, if you have any other question, also feel free to ask on the Facebook group, and I'll be more than happy to respond there.
So is today only a 1 hour, and what's the total amount of hours a week that you will
So
rest your live?
right, so the live session will be 2 hours every session. So from next week, we will start the actual topics. So it will be on Friday evening, it will be 2 hours, 10 p.m. Eastern time, and Saturday evening also 2 hours. So every week, Friday and Saturday, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so today was just the introduction session to introduce exactly the topics and the structure of the code. That's why it's a shorter session. All right, so if there's no other question, guys, I will say good night, and I'll see you next week. And you can expect an email from me with the OVA link this week in few days, and then you can set it up before the class.
All right. Good night.
Come on.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.